All right. Good evening, Paul. Good evening, Jeff. Good to see you. A couple other people lurking out there in the darkness. Thanks for coming tonight. Let me quiet some of this stuff down. All right. Lots to talk about tonight. First off, though, real quick, we'll go through what was in the jam, like we always do. We'll bring this back up for a second. Let's see. Go ahead and put the computer up on the screen, and we'll start out. The first thing you all heard, I'm going to do it that way, was actually off of the Op6. Okay, cool, Jeff. That's cool. So the first thing you heard, the first thing you actually heard, other than the drones and whatnot, was this from the Op6. Little theremin kind of thing. And I don't remember what I played after that. Probably my old favorite, the ice piano. Some stuff from the multi-poly. There was a little bit from the Polybrute. And then going over to, let's see, VSTs. Let's see, we have this coming off. This pad is kind of playing now. Let's solo it. So just this pad. And then also from Pigments, a little bit of this, not much. This didn't work out quite the way I wanted to tonight, which is odd because it's a sound that I've used before. Quasor, good to see you. And Steve, thanks for coming. So there's a little bit of that. Also a little bit of this. Oh, that's the pad that's been played, I believe. Nope, that's something else I just played. So anyway, an assortment of stuff. This drone, this guy that you're hearing soloed now is actually one from Chris over at Signs of Life. One of his, off of one of his sets that I really like. It's got some interesting stuff going on in it too. We'll take a look at it. Actually, this is not it. This is mine. That's up. What you're hearing is his, which is this guy. So, Quasor, yes, deciding on settings for filter, amp envelopes. Do I have a rule of thumb? We can talk about that, sure. But it kind of sort of goes with the kind of sound that I'm trying to create. So, yeah, I do have some rules of thumb. There are some kind of general things that you want to do, and we can talk about those because the filter and the amp envelopes also kind of go hand in hand depending on the effect you're trying to get. So we can touch on that tonight. And let me turn this back on, turn all this stuff back on, and let's see. Final thing is my that you heard throughout is a modification of my usual little arpeggio sound. But tonight I've turned the arpeggiator off, and I'm just letting it do kind of like beat repeats. And with the echo that's on there, with the heavy delay that's on there, that actually kind of sort of almost sounds like an arpeggiator depending on what's being played. So that's pretty much that. That's what was in the jam. I made a bunch of changes just because things weren't working the way I wanted them to. And they're still not quite right, but better than they were. there were a lot of things that I had set up in the Stream Deck that were causing some problems, so I went through, straightened all that, so all that out, and cleaned up some of the scripting. What I lost in that process that I may or may not be able to get back to my satisfaction is fades between cameras. But we'll see. We'll see. I've still got plenty of stuff to work on in there. I did come to the conclusion that I probably should have bought the bigger Stream Deck, though. The little 3x5 button arrangement is not quite big enough to do everything I need to do. But, you know, hey, we live and learn. At some point we'll order the bigger one. The problem with that is then all of my scripts need to be rewritten all over again because the button layout changes, and a lot of the buttons reference other buttons. And so if that breaks, you know, if I change the button arrangement, then all of the a lot of the button calls get broken. So anyway, not a big deal, and I know what to do to fix it. It's just time consuming. So let's see. Let's get to the script. I want to get through. I want to get through as much of the show tonight as possible. Still wanted to make sure we make room for Jeff up at 9:30. So because I don't want to eat into his time if I can help it. So let's move on. First up, a thing we've been putting off and haven't gotten to for the last 3 or 4 weeks, I guess now, or 3 or 4 shows is that's interesting. I got them labeled wrong. Interesting. Okay. Well, anyway, so a few weeks ago, I mentioned that some stuff about Brian Eno, and that should be the right picture. There's Brian, and so I had I kind of had a moment of crisis of sorts about ambient music, and I'm like, you know, am I doing this right? And I don't know that, I still don't know necessarily that there's a right or wrong, but the question still begs, am I doing this right? So I started digging into some of Brian Eno's thoughts about ambient music, because, you know, he kind of sort of invented the thing, or at least coined the term. And so I found out, you know, how he came about the idea of ambient music, which is kind of an interesting story. The gist is that it came about by accident as a result of an accident. And as he tells the story, he was walking home from the studio one day in the rain, and it was, you know, the weather varies depending on which time he tells the story. But he was walking home from the studio and stepped off the curb in front of a car, got hit, and wound up in the hospital for some amount of time. And then home, and he was convalescing at home, and a friend came over and was spending some time with him, and as it came time for her to leave, she asked if he wanted her to put a record on, and so he said, "Yep, that would be nice." So she put on this record of harp music, and it's apparently a wonderful record, but apparently she didn't turn it up enough. It was raining, so that's the other thing. Another part of the story. It's raining, and so she puts this music on, and as I say, every time I hear a recording of Brian telling the story, he tells it slightly differently. But the gist is the stereo. You've heard this story, haven't you, Quasar? So the stereo is broken, for one thing. Only one speaker's working, and she didn't turn it up enough, so he couldn't really hear this. He's frustrated by this because he can't get out of bed to turn it up because he's broken. So all he can hear occasionally over the rain is this occasional harp note, and he thought it was initially frustrated, but then he started to listen and kind of enjoyed that this just, you know, every so often he would hear a note or hear some notes from the harp, and he kind of sort of he gave it a name. He called it ambient music, and he has a lot of thoughts on ambient music and music in general, which is I've referenced in some playlists that I've linked to the show notes, show description for the last couple of weeks. But basically, he's gone on to say that it has gone on. Ambient has evolved to a point that he barely recognizes it anymore. But there is part of the definition that I think is still important, and that is ambient music must be able to accommodate many levels of listening attention without enforcing one in particular, and it must be as ignorable as it is interesting. And I think that's pretty profound. That's a really interesting thought on making music specifically that people can ignore or not. And so I still don't have an answer as to whether I'm doing it right. But I guess maybe one day I'll figure that out. So anyway, down in the show description, there is a link to several Brian Eno interviews, and there's one in particular. These are also linked on the website, and in pretty much anywhere else you see the information about this. So very interesting stuff. If you're into ambient music or really any kind of experimental music, digging into Brian Eno in particular, also Robert Fripp, and a few others that were early on into this experimental electronic music scene, is really enlightening, and it really is kind of freeing in a lot of ways. So I don't know, as I said, if will ever figure out if I'm actually doing this right, but what the heck, I'm having fun. And I think if you go to my Bandcamp and listen to my music over time, some of the earlier new stuff, that makes sense. Well, and so Paul, you bring up an interesting point. One of Eno's ideas about ambient music was that it should be better than the Muzak stuff that is playing everywhere. And now Muzak has gone away, and basically it's whatever somebody's mixtape is for the day almost. I mean, it's all purchased from a service, but the background music you hear in stores and malls and airports and all these places is our pop music, our hits, our everything is now relegated to the background. Because if you go to the airport, really interesting thing. As some of you know, a couple weeks ago I went to Iceland. Iceland is very interesting. The predominant music that I heard was American pop music. I heard very little actual Icelandic music while I was there. Mostly, like I said, American pop. There was some other stuff too. Wi-Fi ended music, lots of things ended music, or elevator music as we used to colloquially call it. And so, but I don't think that pop music really fits the definition, to me anyway, of what is something ambient, because it's not intended to be ignored. People spend a lot of time on catchy lyrics, or some time on catchy lyrics, or maybe some time on lyrics when they're writing pop music, and their intent is for the lyrics to be listened to. I didn't hear any Bjork when I was there at all, Paul. That was kind of surprising to me, honestly. But anyway, so people spend time writing lyrics and writing music to be listened to be heard. And so that, to me, and yes, and there's a hook, and that's that's been going on for everyone wants to have a hook at least of some point, so it's written to draw you in, and ambient is not written to draw you in unless you want to be drawn in. We're not intended to. So no, that might be part of my definition, that there's not a hook. There could be a definite defining style. We all as musicians have our own style. We have our own sound per se, and so maybe we have got a defining style, but no hook. If you listen to the stuff that I play, I don't repeat anything. Bring your own pork. It's interesting. There was some other interesting things about Iceland. I'm not going to cover that tonight because I want to get through the list. The list is long, so I want to get through as much of that as possible. But we can talk about Iceland maybe on another stream or something when I start getting into the off-schedule streaming later in the month or early next month. Let's see. I'm reading the chat. Well, yeah, and that's it catches your ear. It can be interesting or not, and a veiled hook maybe. I don't know. I mean, there's certainly repeating themes. Like you'll hear. In the music that I create anyway, if you listen to most of it, the stuff that's on my Bandcamp is quite varied. Because some of the stuff was written as challenges, and some of it was recorded just for me as experiments or whatever. So there'll be a theme. I always want the music to go somewhere and start someplace and go somewhere and then maybe come back. So you might hear a progression or a segment of the song that will repeat, sort of. And so it kind of grounds us and brings us back. But otherwise, most of my ambient stuff just kind of floats. So yeah, catches your ear or not, most people will just not notice it. It's just they notice that there's something in the background. So anyway, that's I encourage you again to go and watch the videos. As I find more interesting ones, I keep adding them to that playlist. So keep checking back on that playlist. I think there's some really good stuff in there. So that's that. Let's see. Moving on. USB MIDI. USB MIDI sucks. I'm just going to say it. And I'm going to, specifically jump on Korg. Let's see here. It should be this one. The Korg's MIDI, USB MIDI, as it pertains to like the Op6 or the wavestate, the multi-poly, anything Korg has made in the last, since Windows 7 sometimes, or before Windows XP, really, has had this crappy USB MIDI driver, and it buggers things up. And I don't know if anybody really noticed or how much I said about it, but I've been having a fight for the last several weeks since I added one more Korg USB MIDI driven device, that every time I open up Ableton Live and power stuff up, it blows off all of my MIDI devices. Anything that's on USB MIDI just goes away. That includes my controllers, the synths, you name it, it's gone. So here's the deal. So the original Microsoft MIDI or Windows MIDI intent allowed for 10 USB MIDI devices, and I've talked about this before. allowed 10 devices, and Korg wrote their driver with that in mind. So their driver, initially had a maximum of 10 devices in their driver. And so the problem is, or a problem is, that when you plug a MIDI device into a USB port on a Windows machine, Windows catalogs the device, assigns it a port, and there it sits. If you later plug that same MIDI instrument or keyboard or device into another USB port, Windows logs it, assigns it a second MIDI slot, and there it lives. And both of them live there. It doesn't clean up after itself. So you end up with, at some point, your first 10 slots get filled up. Korg's MIDI driver dies because it didn't have any place to put anything. So in, I guess a couple years ago now, Microsoft finally addressed the problem for Windows 11, and you can now have a whole ton of MIDI devices. They left the first 10 slots set up the same way for backwards compatibility. Korg went and made some changes to, I'm not going to say updated because they didn't really do an update, but they allowed their MIDI driver now to accept more than 10 devices. The problem is they didn't do it correctly, and so it still insists if you go into the Korg MIDI driver, and I'll bring that graphic back up again, it's this one. Yeah, so if you go into the Korg MIDI driver, you'll see on the uninstall utility I've got pulled up there, it says MD, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's another screen that goes beyond the 10, the first 10, and there's other devices in there. Well, if a Korg device ends up in one of those devices above 9, it's not going to work because they didn't completely or properly update their driver yet. So that's problem number one. When I added the multi-poly, that pushed us over some limit of USB MIDI devices to the point that things ended up in the same slot somehow. So what would happen is I would make anything to do with MIDI, and Ableton Live Windows would lose its mind, Ableton Live would then lose its mind, and all of the MIDI assignments would be out the window. And I have to go back in and redo every one of them. And so I fought with that, finally figured out looked in the registry, found out this is indeed what's going on. So it's not so much a case where you say it's a Korg denial of service MIDI. It's just it's Windows cruft more than it is Korg. But Korg is like the worst offender as far as the way their MIDI drivers work. So we've got the limit in Windows and fighting with the limit in Korg, and you end up with this. So what I ended up having to do, that ended up making me have to set up because I want to be able to use and demonstrate those Korg the Korg editors for the multi-poly and the wavestate. So I ended up now having to set up a second computer, and the second computer just does the Korg stuff. So the multi-poly editor or the wavestate editor or whatever. And I don't know that. So the thing is, Quasar, that Apple doesn't have this problem. Now, could be they just set their MIDI assignments up correctly. Yeah. No one needs more than 640K. Paul, you know that. Nothing ever would need that. Like even Bill got the memo after a while. So anyway, so now there's a new computer in the mix. It can be used for multiple things. Like I'm using it to monitor the stream tonight as well. But so that ended up with some rearrangement of the room. and I can't show you at the moment because I'm on the well, I sort of can. Let's see. If I go here, now up over here, this computer has changed. It's an old. It's running Windows 11, so you know it's a decent little machine. Not good enough to be a full-on music machine, but it can run the editors. And I can look at the thing and see how far behind the stream actually is on the live. It's like 20 or 30 seconds, which is appalling. So anyway, there's going to be more changes to the layout because I'm still not really thrilled. The other thing I did as far as changing layout here is as a result of yanking out every USB cable into place and starting over. I ended up rearranging stuff in this area. The keyboard computer keyboard was sitting down on the desk, and it was kind of like typing down into a hole. So I put it up on a stand, and the switcher now sits underneath of it, which is kind of immaterial. But anyway, so that's the state on USB MIDI. If you're on Windows and your USB MIDI is all fouled up, I left a couple of links down in the, again, I love to leave links in the show notes. So there is a link down in the show notes to a video by Ian Dixon where he goes through some fixes for it, and even he's not 100% successful. He had to do it twice, and that's in the video. So he did a pretty good job with that. Also linked is a forum post that has it all written out, all the stuff that you have to do. Glad to hear that the Ferrofish is working. That's good. That was a bizarre issue, a really bizarre issue. But in all of this fooling around and figuring all this stuff out, and you know, some other thing that I've developed over time, I kind of sort of mentioned this, I think, on one of the Discords yesterday, probably. I don't know, the time all runs together. I have found something that I don't like about the multi-poly. And the same kind of instance is true of the wavestate, but there is something that I don't like about the multi-poly, and that is that there is no real there's no real modulation matrix per se. I mean, you can on the hardware you can scroll through endless screens of what is the modulation matrix, but on the editor anyway, there's no actual modulation matrix. Let's take a look. So I'm going to pull the chat out for a second while we're doing this so they can see where you can see the modulations. So there's no actual place to pull up a table that is the modulation matrix. If you want to find out what's modulating something or what a modulation is, you have to go to the thing that's being modulated, whatever that is, and click on it. And then over here on this section over here, you'll get the list of the things that are modulating it, and you can add additional things or subtract things. But it, you know, as when I'm working through a patch, and I know when a lot of people are working through a patch, you want to be able to pull up a chart that shows you all of the modulations. Like if I go into, go back to here, if I go into Pigments, for instance, here, I can go in and I can go into this section here, and I can look and see, if that one's not doing anything, find something that's actually doing something. You know, I can go into these and say, you know, what are all they modulating? There's still not a whole all-out chart, and this is a very simple patch. So I can see what something is modulating, or I can tell, you know, there's also ways to tell from the device. So there's at least two ways to look it up. Now, better still, as a way to, but you know, something that works better is, let's go into data track here real quick, and we'll stick. Let's see. well, I know what we can show, because Korg does know how to get this right, at least in their plugins. If we go to the wavestate native plugin, okay, and I can go in. I have to remember to find it. You still have the same thing where you've got, you highlight something and it shows up a list of modulations, but there's also, and I have to find it. There is, because I don't spend as much time in here as I should. I spend more time in the other editor. La 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 la. I had this up. Oh, you have your mod list. This shows your entire searchable modulation matrix. And the thing is, the multi-polys like this too. There are dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of modulation sources and destinations. So each destination can have up to 2 sources doing different things. So it's very frustrating. The nice thing about the wavestate native app is I can say, performance only, layer, if I'm in, and this, by the way, this chart only pertains to this layer. If I want to look at layer B, I go into layer B's chart. It's not turned on, but I would go into layer B, and I could look at the same thing for layer B, even though you can, but at least I've got a chart, I'm hoping that when Korg comes out with the VST for the multi-poly, that they correct that. But this is, it's a bit of, it makes the instrument harder, I think, to work with if you don't have that kind of functionality. Pretty much everything else I have has got, either the matrix is small enough that it's not a big deal that it's not there, or like in the case of the Polybrute, this whole thing there's the modulation matrix. I can visually see exactly what it's doing. And I can assign things within the modulation matrix very easily in a way that makes sense. So anyway, Korg, that's a ball dropped by Korg, I think, in probably this whole Raspberry Pi based synth series. So anyway, that's still, hey, good to see you. So good, that said, I got one complaint about the multi-poly. So to have only one complaint about an instrument as complex as the multi-poly, and only have one complaint about it, I think that's doing pretty well. So that's my that's my gripe about USB MIDI, Korg MIDI, and Korg keyboard for night. I not PSS sort of, yeah, okay. So anyway, that's that. Let's move on to the fun stuff, sort of. A couple items about Pigments, and then we're going to get into playing with, picking up from where we were last week with Pigments. And I want to watch my time too. Okay, good, we got plenty of time. And we'll get into the thing with envelopes too as part of it. So let me do a thing over here just so I know what's going on. There we go. Okay. Let's see. So one thing to know about Pigments 6, if you or one thing that I've run across and is got some answer from Arturia on currently. Currently, the if you have Analog Lab, you cannot open presets created in Pigment 6 within Analog. Oh, no stream tonight. Okay, Jeff. Hope everything's okay. So if you create like all of these new, I went to try and open up some of these new presets that I've created in Analog Lab, so I could use all the controls on the Key Lab to do things with them, and they won't open. It tells you you can't do it. I sent out a call for help, and the folks from Arturia have said that it will be updated. That's something that they know they need to do. Ordinarily, they will release a new analog lab with a new release of Pigments, and the holdup has to do with Astrolab, the Astrolab keyboard thing, or whatever they call that thing. There's some technical stuff they have to do to get it to be able to run Pigments 6 presets as well. So once that's ready, they'll roll the whole thing out. They'll roll the new version of Analog Lab out, which will be cool. At the moment, I mean, it's not like it's a huge deal to me. I can get the control that I want, or most of the control that I want, with the Control S. I just wanted to see how it would react with, or how differently it would react. With the Key Lab. No big deal. It is just a thing. So let's get into playing with Pigments, because that's what we're all here for, right? So let's get some stuff open here to play with. So first I'll do a kind of sort of a little demo of what we're talking about tonight. And the first thing is going to be we're going to play with some with the vocoder effect. And so I have a preset prepared, of course, and a little demo. So let's open that up and put that over here. I say put that over here. There we go. The vocoder's up. Okay. So I'm going to play this scene here, or actually a part of it's already playing. So I will just go ahead and play some notes on this track. Okay, it stopped. There we go.
Have been astonished that Japan could in a single day have plunged into war against the United States and the British Empire. What kind of
If you ever wondered what Winston Churchill would sound like through a vocoder, here we go.
they do not realize?
Let me turn that up a little bit.
Have been taught a lesson which they and the world will not forget.
So setting this up is actually pretty easy, and we'll go ahead and do one. But I just wanted to, it's actually a really good vocoder.
Together, facing a group of mighty foes, cigar rich. Here we are, together, defending all that to prevent.
So anyway, enough of Winston for the moment. Let's go ahead and bring this up full screen. Let's get into the way this works. So the vocoder is actually pretty simple. But what I have discovered is, in playing around, that there's certain kinds of sources for the carrier that it likes better than others. Basically, you're wanting, as your carrier, something that's fairly rich in harmonics. So the patch that I've created underneath of that, let me jump back over to effects real quick. We'll kill the vocoder. So the vocal input in that instance in the demo is a speech to Congress by Winston Churchill in 1939 or somewhere or thereabouts, I think. It's the same speech that I used as the background, or as the speech parts in my most recent release, Dystopian Tendencies. So I got the vocoder turned off at the moment. We'll go back to the synth. So this is the sound. Oh, it's still going to trigger it. Hang on a sec. Let's stop that. Okay. So fairly buzzy, full of harmonics. Now at this point it's just a recording, yes. So very buzzy. Strings work really well. That's why when you heard early vocoders, it's a lot of early vocoding was done over string patches, over like a string machine, like a Selena, or something like that, because of all the harmonics, it works really well for the vocoder to tear apart and put back together. So, the first part of doing a vocoded part really is to develop the carrier patch. So the part that you hear is the carrier patch, and the voice or whatever you feed into the vocoder, it modulates it, and that's when you get the effect. So technically, and this one works a little differently than some, but like I have no input into that now. Theoretically, if I turn the vocoder on, okay, it is working. It wasn't working the other day. So there is a sidechain input, and that's what I'll show you. So right now I'm playing chords. If you were to look, here I am banging chords on the keyboard. Nothing's playing because there's nothing coming in to. I've got nothing coming in to modulate this audio. So in Ableton Live anyway, the way we would make this work is I'm going to change my sidechain input on Pigments. So let me just slide that out of the way for the moment. I'll bring that back up full screen so we can see. So right now my sidechain input is track 11, Churchill. If I change this now, I can change this to mic 1. Mic 1 is my voice, and you can see I'm getting input. I've got it set to be post effects, which is the way I'm going to want it here. And in theory, now I've got the vocoder on, if I hit the chords when I talk, I don't have enough gate up. So let's we have to mess with the levels. Let's see here. So let's see. Easiest way to do this, I'm just going to turn the gain up here. I'll crank it to good. Now, okay, so there we got that. I can see it's working. Let me douse the mic in the regular mix.
I don't know if you understand what I'm saying.
So that was the gist of it real quick. So when you get into the vocoder itself, and I'm going to go ahead and put Winston back in as our source so that we can see what we got going on. Turn that gain back down where it was good before. And yeah, I probably did have a little too much gain, and the thing is, I can't really hear it in my ears readily, so it requires some tweaking. So there's a lot of stuff you can do with it though, and let's go ahead and get Winston playing again. And okay, we'll go back to this. So now if I hit a chord and Winston's actually talking, oh, I didn't change the input back there. There we go.
Experience. One of the most moving and thrilling in my life.
Okay, so we can hear that works. So the way a vocoder sort of works, and this is going to be a vast oversimplification, but what we do is we take the incoming audio and we break it down into frequency bands, and then we modulate that based on the envelope and frequency of the incoming modulation audio, and that gives you different levels of each part of each frequency band within the carrier audio. So
sure I am that this day.
the more bands you put in, and you can adjust the number of bands here, the more bands, the more intelligible the speech is, and the less mechanical it sounds.
But its pain and toils
Sort of.
are not beyond our endurance. As long as we have faith,
But the more, at least the more intelligible it is, the more bands you have. And this will do, I think, this will do a bunch of bands.
salvation will not be denied us. In the words on it, he shall not be of evil guiding.
One thing I've noticed, the more bands you have, the less it seems to follow the chord or the notes that you're playing. And I'm not sure why that is. I don't know enough about it to know why. It's 40 bands is the max that it'll do. 20 bands works really, or 8 bands worked really well for this.
The glorious defense of our nation.
And now I've got too much gain again. And I don't know why, because it was the same gain that we started with. It's a little tweaky, obviously. So I'm going to turn that back up to 8. That worked well. You could also set the frequency range that it breaks up. So this is actually a larger range than it really needs to be. Typical audio or vocal voice, spoken voice, is between 300, around typically between 300-ish and hertz and 3 kilohertz. And certainly this recording is band limited to something like that because of the equipment used at the time. Gain down, Vocoder first control signal. Yes. Well, it's not. This isn't really gain. This is the gate. This is when it turns on and off. So basically, if you see that line moving up and down, that's the threshold at which it's going to cut in or not. So if I turn it way up here, this isn't gain, it's a gate. If the input audio doesn't come up high enough to cross that threshold, it doesn't actually do anything. So you see bits and pieces of it are cranked up. So the gain into this is actually set. The gain into this is actually set in this in Ableton anyway. Is set with this control here. Oh, I see why it should be pre-effects for this one. That's why. 4 was the number that 4 dB again was what I found worked well in this particular patch. Yeah, small screen, and then I got things, well, it's as big as I can make it. And that's still a little hot because I'm pegging all the frequency bands, but. So anyway, you can adjust the bandwidths and you can all kinds. Each one of these things will affect the sound. Let's see. I stick my finger on the sustain pedal, or my foot on the sustain pedal under here.
To make sure that these catastrophes do not encounter for the third time. It is not given to us to peer into the wistful agriculture.
So the formant control basically gives you the kind of sort of the shape of the mouth, so to speak. Let's turn this up a little bit so we can a little more intelligible.
In majesty, in the life of visual.
Some people will say that the format, you can make it sound like a man or a woman or a boy or a girl. I don't really find that to be true. I just find it's like it changes the. I think it's more like it changes the shape of the mouth, so to speak.
I wish indeed that my mother.
There's some other controls here, different modes. They got the vintage, modern, and dirty. I think of all of them, I like the vintage sound the best. And I tend to like a moderate number of bands.
My father had been American, and my mother British. It's
Ah.
the other way around.
That's no fun.
I might have got here on my own.
At least you don't have as many MIDI, USB MIDI problems with a Mac as we have in Windows land. Apple at least got that mostly right. I mean, you were right in your comment earlier. USB MIDI is a hot mess all the way around, but
That the task which has been set
at least Apple
above our strength
did a better job with managing what there is of it.
and not beyond our influence. As long as we have faith
So anyway, there's the monitor. They got this dirty mode,
and
which I don't really like at all.
salvation will not be denied us.
So that's the quick and dirty on the vocoder. You can also use other sources within Pigments as your modulator. So you can use
Will be
one of the synth engines, the utility
have already been set.
oscillators, or filter output as your input into the modulation input on the vocoder. The typical use is audio in, and then you can route it from some other source within within your DAW, be it an external audio or external audio, microphone, whatever. The problem that I run into with, and the specific reason, jumping back to the MIDI real quick, the specific reason that I need to be able to use USB MIDI, is twofold. The one reason is that my controller keyboards are USB. In order to use their functionality. So like with the Control S, as you know, I've got on the display of the Control S here, I can get if I go into
They do not realize that we shall
to get in the right spot. It won't work because I don't have the right thing in there. If I've got a VST that's hosted in Complete Kontrol, like Pigments here, and I go to the plugin, I've got the controls, the primary controls from Pigments, right here on the key on the keyboard. So I don't have to reach to the computer to make a change. And these changes, if I use them when I'm sequencing, they'll get recorded into the sequencer as well. So that's my. And then the other reason that I need to have the USB MIDI working is that, oops, that was a mistake. Let me jump back to where I was. Here we go. I changed away from the active channel with the sustain pedal lifted, and then pressed and then lifted the or changed channels, and with the thing still set. When I went away, I couldn't cancel the sustain. So the other thing is that with a lot of things, a lot of synthesizers now, their editors require a USB connection from the computer to the instrument in order to use their editors. So this editor here requires a USB connection. Same with the one for the wavestate. If I don't have a USB connection, I can't control this. I can't see what things are doing. So there's those are my reasons for needing the USB, and I find it interesting. And this is, I guess, another sort of. This is just a generic gripe about a lot of synthesizers in general these days, requiring these USB-driven editors. I mean, there's a lot of functionality, and I guess that the concern may be that it would clog up conventional MIDI. But that said, the editor for the Take 5, I believe it is, Take 5 of the Polybridge, one of the two of these over here, either the Polybrute or the Take 5, and I can't remember which one, does it always says X. And so the editor for, I can't remember which one it is, but whichever one it is, the editor works flawlessly without USB. And so, you know, and so yeah, that's what I've done. I put up this second laptop just to have the just to be able to do the USB edits. On the Korg stuff, I may eventually hook the what little modal stuff I have up to it. I'm not sure where that crackle has decided to come from. Except that I'm pegging the CPU like crazy all of a sudden. Let's see here. What would be doing that? Why would that be going on? I don't have anything else running on that machine at the moment. Just live. Interesting. What is pegging the CPU? Let's move this out of the way. This particular instance of Pigments is what's doing it. Okay, let's shut it down for a minute. Okay, that's a little better. I'm not sure why that particular instance of Pigments is clobbering the CPU like that, but that's interesting. Yeah, Pigments does require a lot of horsepower, and I'm running what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 instances of Pigments right now. So even with a Ryzen 9 processor, that's asking a lot. It also does some funny things in graphics when it becomes unhappy. And unlike some other things, this doesn't resize well. Let's do this one. Little thing. Okay. So yeah, the joys of high tech. So let's see. We dealt with the vocoder. So I'm going to actually kill that one off. And see if they get some control back here. Boom, that can go away. And this playback can stop. Okay, now let's turn this guy back on. That's still pegging the CPU. That's interesting. I'll have to send this in after a long period of time. This uses the new modal engine. So let's see. Let's make this. We'll just make the track stop. It will eventually stop, and oh, I wonder if I did a stupid again. There we go. Still pegging CPU. I think I know what happened. Sustain pedal was stuck on, even though I must have slid by this one with the sustain pedal on as I went by. One of the dangers of sequentially jumping through the hoops. Let's see what happens if I play this one again. This is like, you know, things we learn while we're doing stuff live. It should come back around shortly. And this has only been playing now for, I actually started this up about this sequence up about, I don't know, 6 o'clock. So it's been playing for 3 hours now. Yeah, that's better. That's a better number. I stacked up voices like crazy. That's what was going on. Oops. All right, so let's get to. I'm not going to do this in Pigments, but what I want to do, we'll get into some quick chatter about some sound design and choices of envelopes. So let's get this guy out of the way. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to create a new MIDI track. And so Pigments is in the Komplete Kontrol wrapper because of the Control S controller. And that's what allows NKS compatible VSTs to map their controls to the controls on the keyboard or on the controller. There's some other neat things you can do with that as well. Like I can build chains within the Komplete Kontrol wrapper, like instruments and effect chains. And I have them all controlled easily from the keyboard. I showed that a few months ago, but I'll show that again sometime. Maybe probably not tonight, but I'll show that again sometime. But I could build put a some sort of synth, NKS compatible synth, followed by an echo and a reverb, or delay and a reverb, and then all of those are instantly reachable from the controller. Which is kind of unique. There's not a lot of controllers that can do that at a reasonable price. So to do this little quick demo about doing different kind envelope choices and how envelopes work, let's use Vital, because it's quick and fast and light. So we'll open up an instance of Vital. Let's get that routed where it's supposed to be. We're going to route that to the synth bus and tell it that I want sends only. Okay, so it's loud. Let's turn it down a little bit. Okay, so here we got basic sawtooth, buzzy thing. We have envelopes. We got a bunch. We have the capability of a bunch of envelopes within Vital. Again, I'm going to do this pretty simply. I do want this to make this sound at least interesting, because I don't like to do anything that sounds boring. So let's go ahead. Let's decide. We're going to start. First thing we're going to do is we're going to make a basic pad, just a synth pad sound. So we'll up the unison. Give it maybe three voices. Turn the detune down some. Okay, so we got that going on. Still a little bit loud, so let me turn it down a little bit. Okay, and let's do something where we get a better wavetable in here. Let's go here, and we'll go to Factory, Basic Shapes. And one again that's a little more interesting, we can use the quad saw, and let's modulate that so that it does some fun stuff. So we'll put that on the position, that in 3D so you can see what's going on. I'm going to turn the rate so that it's nice and slow since we're doing a pad, so you can see it moves through the wavetable. That'll work. So we want to make when we want to make a pad, typically we want a slow build. We want it to kind of, so it builds up and then it kind of drops off a little bit, and then when we release the keys, it lingers and goes away. So in order to do that, we're going to grab it. We're going to lengthen out our attack, and I'll bring the sustain down a little bit, and you can do this either with the knobs. If it, like on a hardware synth, you would do this with the knobs. On this, we can do it graphically. So we'll stretch that out. All right, so that's the basic gist of making a pad. Honestly, we can probably do some things like we'll change the curves here. I like to do this, and then so it's a little more flowing. And for a real pad, we'll put that in air quotes. We'd actually stretch that out a little further. So now we can do a couple things. Right now we don't even have an envelope turned on. So we can do two things as far as modulating the envelope, or several things actually as far as modulating the envelope. Let's go ahead and turn our filter, modulating our filter. We'll turn that on, and I'll leave it just like it is for the moment. You can hear that's rounded off a lot of the high end. So let's go ahead and open the filter up a little bit. Okay, so we might want that also to change over time, instead of just being fixed as what it is. So we can use the same envelope as the amplitude if we want, and we just drag that down here to the cutoff, and use this. I'm going to right click on here, and I like to do these things in stereo, and I like to make them bipolar, which means they move around the start point as opposed to starting at the start point and going up. So now if I go ahead and whack the chord, not only does the amplitude change, but you can hear the filter changing. Actually, let me make this mono so it's a little easier to hear what it's doing. So you can hear the timbre change as well as the amplitude change. So oftentimes you actually want them to be separate though. So we'll go ahead and remove this. We'll do another envelope. And I'm going to want the filter to change more slowly on this one than it does on the amplitude. So the idea is that the volume will come up. As the volume is coming up, the filter changes at a different rate. So we'll just drag this over, drag that onto the cutoff, and let's see, that's actually the amplitude is actually too slow. So let's do this, bring it back, bring this, stretch it out, and just to make it a little clearer, I'm going to go ahead and kill the shorten the attack. So you hear how that filter is moving with the envelope. So the trick here is to get them both to move together in a way that makes an interesting sound. So that's the gist of making a pad and how you would choose envelope settings for a pad. So the other end of that spectrum is a pluck, and so with the pluck we have a very short attack and then some length of time of decay. So typically, let's go ahead and kill this envelope. We can remove that. Back to only having the one envelope going on. So short attack, typically you'll bring your curve down this way, you'll bring your sustain all the way out, and so now we can make it a little longer and now turn it up some. Okay, so there's your basic pluck. You didn't have to make a whole lot of changes. There's not a whole lot to it, really. You can change the curve and you can change the length of time it takes to decay out. And then, but what gets more interesting too is when you now take and we do an envelope, a different envelope for the filter. Actually lengthen the decay of the pluck out and keep the filter pretty fast. So you hear that little buzzy. It's buzzy at the start and then smooths out. And a lot of times too, instead of using a sawtooth for a pluck, I'll do something a little softer. Or I'll go all crazy and go with a pulse. And this can be the basis of a bass as well if we just pitch it down an octave or 2 octaves, and you got a funky sub bass. And we could roll that off a little bit too, make it a little smoother. Take some of the resonance out of it. We get kind of a dub bass. So those are the extremes of dealing with with envelopes, and we can of course use that idea to do a lot of different things. Like I can take this guy here and lengthen this way out, so we still have kind of a bassy thing, but and what we're doing is we're opening the amplifier up right away, all the way. And then letting it tail off slowly, and then we're bringing the filter up a little more slowly than the amplitude, and then running it off relatively quickly for that kind of. Yeah, shouldn't do too much of that. I'll get copyright, hit on the copyright. So that's the basic of the real basics of why we would choose a particular amplitude or a typical or a particular envelope for amplitude or filter. And we can have all kinds of fun with it. I mean, there's all kinds of fun stuff we can do. We can take this, like I said, I like to make things stereo a lot. So you hear it if you've got earbuds on or headphones on. You hear it kind of pulling across this across your from left to right. And if I turn the resonance up, you'll hear that a little bit more. So you hear the high frequencies drop out, I think, of the left and then accentuate in the right. So anyway, those are fun things you can do with envelopes. You can do something similar with the amplitude. We can make it. There's stuff we can do with it too. Somewhere there's a stereo control for that. But you can take the amplitude envelope and use it more than just one place. Like we could take that and have it tickle the unison amount just a little bit. You don't really see it going on here, but it's actually changing the number of voices in the unison. Let's go crazy. I wonder what that would sound. And see, this is where I start getting it. I start going into rabbit holes now. But it's like, what would that sound like in a pad? So let's make a pad with that thing going on. Bring it up at least an octave. Now, one thing you can do with Vital and Pigments as well is you can put multiple things on a modulators or on a control. So I'm going to pull this second LFO, and we'll change it to a sine. And let's put that on the unison voice count as well. Yeah, you can. Right, you can do. Let's go ahead and do detune as well. What the heck? The thing with detune, it's detune, at least in Vital anyway. It gets twitchy. If you go too far, it gets really ugly really fast. But I'm going to do. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it. I'll make it bipolar. I will make it stereo. We go. What the heck? Let's go ugly. I'm going to change this rate. Now, one thing I will say, ordinarily, if I wanted to get that effect, I'm just going to throw a phaser on it, you know, because it's very similar. I mean, it's very similar in sound to a phaser, and I might just do that instead. We've gone a little too far on the detune amount, but you get the idea. You know, these are all the things we can, and we could do that with an envelope too, or I could do, like, you know, we could get into doing these stretching and stuff. Cheat mode chorus, yeah. Like we could take this inharmonic stretch, and we'll take this same LFO here, we'll drag that over to it, and this one we're definitely going to make bipolar and stereo. Whoops, I missed. Oops. Did I kill it? Apparently I inadvertently deleted it. So here we go. Oh, there's already something on there. Sometimes, there we go. Sometimes Vital gets a little tweaky with things. So anyway, I wanted to make that stereo. So you can see in the if you look at the display here for what's going on the oscillator, now that we've made all these changes to it, you can see the effect of that stretch and the unison. But we've digressed. The idea was really just to get into the envelopes. So that's I'm not going to delete this just yet, but I am going to change a little bit, a couple things here. We might as well finish this sound up. I'm probably not going to keep this, but we're going to at least finish it up. We'll do that. Okay. Let's go ahead and throw some effects on it real quick. Let's see. Oh, and so, you know, heck, we got this whole matrix. Remember I was talking to, you know, things with matrices? This has got the, you know, the whole matrix right here. But anyway, let's go ahead and throw, let's see. We'll throw some delay on it. That on. 8th, make it ping pong. And we'll make it dotted 8ths on both sides. That works. We'll throw some reverb on it because we can. And we're going to crank the delay up, and we're going to crank. You're going to go live at 9:45. Okay. Very good. Have you caught all the Pokemons? That's the question. So let's turn the size up, the time up. Let's see what we got here. Going to turn that pre-delay down a little bit. Turn the mix up just a hair. And I think I'm going to smooth that filter out just a touch. Bring the basic frequency of that down. Oh yeah, we're going to make that bipolar too. And bring it back up the octave. Yeah, the Pokemons, they hide here when it gets cold, Paul. Alright, I'm going to make like 2 little minor changes, additions to this. I'm going to take and put mod wheel on the cutoff frequency some. Oops, not drive. Put that on the wrong one. Well, drive is fine too, but let's put it on. I wanted it on there. But not that much. Good bit. All right. Hibernate in the winter. Yeah, everything hibernates in some places. Okay, that's really going to do it for me tonight. I think that was fun playing with the sound. I'm going to go ahead and crank up the music, and I'll play a little bit of music and call it a night. Thanks everybody for coming, Paul and Jeff and Half God and everyone else who was here. Who all was here? Let's see. Let me pull up the participants. Oh, well, gee. Who did we lose? Let's see. Go way back. Quasor is, I don't know if you're still here or not. But anyway, thanks for coming, Quasor, and pretty much everyone else who came. Steve was here. Thanks you all for stopping by. I'm, like I said, going to play some music. Here, pull that back up for a minute. And, yeah, play some music and call it a night in a few minutes, and then we'll all jump. We should all go over and check out Jeff's stream. It's always fun and interesting in the spaceship over there. So that's going to do it for me again. Thanks, guys. We'll see you all soon.